Imagine you've been walking through a dense forest your entire life. The trees are so thick, so towering, so impossibly tangled that you've never once seen the sky. You've heard rumors about it. Other travelers have mentioned something called sunlight, something called open space, but you've only known branches and shadows and the constant effort of pushing through undergrowth. And then one day, without warning, you step into a clearing, and there it is, the sky, infinite, blue, completely unobstructed, and in that moment you realize something that changes everything. The sky was always there, above every step you took, behind every branch that blocked your view. The sky never left. It was never hidden. You simply couldn't see it, because you were so focused on the forest. This is what Alan Watts spent his life trying to show us. Not through complex philosophy or religious doctrine, but through a simple, almost playful invitation to look up, to notice what has always been present. To recognize that the thing we've been searching for, the peace we've been chasing, the understanding we've been desperate to grasp, has never been somewhere else. It has never been in the future. It has never been waiting at the end of some long spiritual journey. It has been here, in this very moment, as close as your own breath, as intimate as the feeling of being alive right now. And here's what I want to offer you today. By the end of this time together, I'm going to share something with you. Not just an idea to think about, but a recognition to feel in your bones, something that has the power to dissolve the very thing that keeps you searching, struggling, and feeling like life is always happening somewhere other than where you are. But to get there, we need to take a journey together. We need to look at some uncomfortable truths. We need to question some things you've believed your entire life. And we need to do something that sounds simple but is actually quite radical. We need to stop, just for a moment, and actually be where we are. So let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that you're always waiting? Not necessarily for something specific, though sometimes it is specific. Sometimes you're waiting for the weekend, for the promotion, for the relationship to improve, for the kids to grow up, for retirement, for things to finally settle down. But underneath all those specific things you're waiting for, there's a deeper waiting. A sense that real life, the good part, the meaningful part, hasn't quite started yet, that you're in some kind of preparation phase, some kind of preliminary round, and that soon, if you just get a few more things sorted out, if you just achieve a little more, understand a little more, become a little more spiritual or successful or secure, then you'll finally arrive. Then you'll finally be able to relax. Then life will really begin. This is the great illusion that Alan Watts pointed to again and again. This sense that we're on a journey to somewhere else, that life is a pilgrimage toward a destination, that there's a point, a goal, an arrival that will justify all the struggle. And because we believe this so deeply, because it's built into the very structure of our thinking, we miss the obvious. We miss the fact that the destination never comes, not because we fail to reach it, but because it doesn't exist in the way we imagine it does. Think about it. Think about all the things you've achieved in your life, all the goals you've reached, all the milestones you've passed. Remember how it felt when you finally got that thing you wanted so badly. Maybe it was a degree, a job, a relationship, a house, a certain amount of money in your bank account. Remember the anticipation, the excitement, the sense that once you had it, things would be different. And then remember what happened after. Maybe there was a moment of satisfaction, a brief glow of accomplishment. But how long did it last? How quickly did the goalpost move? How soon did you find yourself wanting the next thing, waiting for the next arrival, believing again that fulfillment was just around the corner? This isn't a flaw in you. This is how the game is designed. This is what Watts called the illusion of the pursuit. The strange trick where the very act of chasing satisfaction guarantees that you'll never catch it. Because satisfaction isn't something you catch. It isn't something you arrive at. It's something you recognize was always already here, waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where we start to approach that insight I promised you. The reason you can't stop running isn't because you're weak or undisciplined or spiritually immature. The reason you can't stop running is because you believe in a runner. You believe there's someone inside you, a little self, a little me, who needs to get somewhere, who needs to improve, who needs to figure things out and manage life and make the right decisions and become better. And this little self, this manager, this controller you imagine yourself to be, is constantly working, constantly evaluating, constantly trying to steer the ship of your life towards some better future. And the exhausting truth is that this self, this manager, this controller, doesn't actually exist, not in the way you think it does. Now I know that sounds strange, maybe even threatening. Because if there's no self, no manager, no controller, then who's going to take care of things? Who's going to make sure you don't fall apart, don't make terrible mistakes, don't end up lost and confused? This is the fear that keeps us clinging to the illusion. The fear that if we let go of the one who's trying to control everything, chaos will follow. But what if the opposite is true? What if the chaos, the anxiety, the constant sense of struggle is actually being created by this imaginary controller? What if the very effort to manage your life is what's making it feel so unmanageable? Consider this. Have you ever had a moment, maybe rare, maybe fleeting, when you were so absorbed in something that you forgot yourself completely? Maybe you were playing music, and your fingers moved without you directing them. Maybe you were in conversation, and words came out that surprised you with their clarity. Maybe you were watching a sunset, and there was just the sunset, no one watching it, just pure seeing. In those moments, did life fall apart? Did you make terrible mistakes? Did chaos consume you? Or was there actually more clarity, more flow, more effortless rightness than when you're trying to control everything? This is what Watts was pointing to when he talked about the art of letting go. Not letting go of action, not becoming passive or indifferent, but letting go of the illusion that there's a separate someone who needs to be doing the acting. Letting life live through you instead of you trying to live life. It sounds subtle, and it is subtle, but it's also the difference between exhaustion and ease, between struggle and flow, between feeling like a stranger in your own existence and feeling like you belong here, have always belonged here, were never separate from here. Let me try another way of saying this. You know how when you try to fall asleep, really try, it becomes almost impossible. The effort of trying to sleep keeps you awake. The harder you work at it, the more elusive it becomes. But when you give up, when you stop trying to sleep, when you just lie there and let whatever happens happen, sleep comes on its own. It arrives by itself when you stop interfering with it. This is how so much of life works. Happiness comes when you stop trying to be happy. Understanding comes when you stop trying to understand. Peace comes when you stop trying to be peaceful. The things we most deeply want are available to us the moment we stop grasping for them. But the grasper doesn't want to hear this. The grasper, the controller, the manager, is terrified of this message, because this message threatens its very existence. If you don't need to grasp, then what's the grasper for? If you don't need to control, then what's the controller for? If life can live itself beautifully without you managing it, then who are you? And this is the question. This is the edge we're approaching. Who are you, really, when you stop being the manager of your life? Here's where the forest begins to thin. Here's where we start to glimpse the clearing. You've been told your entire life that you are something like a little person living inside your head. Behind your eyes there's a you, a ghost in the machine, a homunculus watching the screens of your senses and pulling the levers of your actions. This is the self you take for granted, the one you're trying to improve, the one you're trying to understand, the one you think will eventually reach enlightenment or success or peace. But when you actually look for this self, when you turn attention inward and try to find the one who's looking, what do you find? Thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, a constant flow of experience. But where is the experiencer? You can find things that are experienced, but can you find the one experiencing them? It's like trying to bite your own teeth, like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. The looker can never find itself because it isn't a thing to be found. It isn't an object in experience. It's the very space in which experience happens. This isn't mystical poetry. This is direct investigation. This is what you can discover right now if you're willing to look. The self you've been trying to manage, protect, improve, and enlighten isn't an entity. It's a process. It's a verb masquerading as a noun. It's thinking happening, but no separate thinker. Feeling happening, but no separate feeler. Living happening, but no separate one who lives. And the moment you see this, really see it, something remarkable happens. The burden lifts. Not the burden of life, but the burden of having to manage life. The exhausting job of being someone relaxes, and what's left isn't emptiness, isn't nihilism, isn't despair. What's left is life itself, flowing freely, unobstructed by the constant interference of a fictional manager. But let me be clear about something. This isn't about becoming passive. This isn't about sitting in a corner and letting the world collapse around you. The beautiful paradox is that when you stop being the doer, action becomes more effortless, more appropriate, more alive. You still cook dinner, pay bills, have conversations, make decisions, but it happens the way your heart beats, the way your lungs breathe. Not because you're making it happen, but because happening is what life does. You're not separate from life trying to figure out how to live it. You are life, living itself. Think of a dancer who has practiced so long that they don't have to think about the steps. The dance just happens through them. Or a musician who doesn't read the notes anymore, but lets the music flow from some place deeper than thought. This is what it means to be fully alive. Not to be someone doing life, but to be the very dance of existence. Not to be someone watching the music, but to be the music playing itself. And here's the relief. Here's the exhale you might have been holding your entire life. You don't have to figure this out. You don't have to achieve this. You don't have to become someone who understands this, because this is already the case. Right now. This is already how it is. The only thing that obscures it is the belief that it isn't so. The only thing that blocks the sky is the illusion that there's someone who needs to find the sky. This is why I called this video what I did. This could be the last video you need to watch. Not because I have special knowledge to transmit to you, not because these words are magical, but because at some point the search has to end. At some point you have to stop gathering more information, more perspectives, more techniques for waking up, and actually wake up, actually notice that you were never asleep, actually see that the sky was never hidden. The spiritual search, for all its beauty and sincerity, can become its own trap. It can become another version of the journey to somewhere else, another postponement of presence, another way of saying not yet. I need to meditate more, read more books, attend more retreats, have more experiences. And all of that can be wonderful. All of that has its place, but at some point it becomes avoidance, dressed up as seeking. It becomes another way of not being here, now, where you always already are. So let me give you the insight I promised. Let me put it as simply as words allow. You are not on your way anywhere. You have already arrived. Not because you've achieved something, but because there was never anywhere else to arrive. The destination you've been seeking is the place you've never left. The peace you've been chasing is what you are when you stop chasing. The understanding you've been desperate for is the understanding that there's nothing to understand, only something to recognize. And that recognition isn't in the future, it's available now, it's always been available now. Now is the only time it could ever be available, because now is the only time there is. Your entire life you've been like someone sitting in a movie theater, so engrossed in the film that you've forgotten you're in a theater. You've forgotten that the screen is just a screen. You've forgotten that you can at any moment look around and see where you actually are. The drama on screen isn't less interesting when you remember it's a movie. If anything, it becomes more enjoyable because you're no longer stressed about how it turns out. You can watch the whole thing with appreciation, with presence, with the kind of lightness that comes from knowing it's a play. This is what Alan Watts meant when he talked about life as a play, as a dance, as music. Not that it isn't real, not that it doesn't matter, but that it isn't the serious, heavy problem to be solved that we've made it into. Life is what's happening while you're busy trying to figure out life. The cosmic joke is that there's nothing to figure out. The search for meaning is complete when you realize that meaning was never lost. So here's what I invite you to do. Not as homework, not as another spiritual task to accomplish, but as an experiment, as play. Right now, wherever you are, take one breath, just one. And instead of breathing as someone who's trying to get somewhere, breathe as if this breath is the destination, as if this inhale, this exhale, this simple exchange of air is the point of everything, because in a very real sense it is. This moment is not a stepping stone to some other moment. It's not preparation for real life, it is real life, it's the only life there is. And then notice what's noticing. Not with effort, not trying to have a spiritual experience, just gently recognizing that there's awareness here, that there's something that knows you're breathing, knows you're listening to these words, knows you're alive. And that something isn't working hard to know these things. It just knows, effortlessly. The way space effortlessly holds everything in it. The way the sky effortlessly contains every cloud. You are that. You've always been that. And the tragedy, if we can call it that, is that you've been so busy being someone, so busy managing and controlling and trying to understand, that you've overlooked the obvious. You've missed the clearness of the clearing because you were focused on the complexity of the forest. But the clearing is still here. The sky never moved. And in this moment, if you let it, everything you've been searching for can stop being somewhere else and start being exactly where it always was. There's a beautiful simplicity on the other side of all this complexity. There's a rest that isn't the opposite of action, but the source of it. There's a way of being alive that doesn't require effort, doesn't require understanding, doesn't require you to become anything other than what you are. And it's not something you find, it's something you recognize, you never lost. So maybe, just maybe, this could be the last video you need to watch. Not because the seeking is bad, not because there's nothing more to learn, but because at some point the invitation to come home has to be accepted. At some point you have to stop preparing for life and start being alive. At some point the endless journey has to reveal itself as the endless arrival it always was. And that point is now. It's always been now. It couldn't be any other time. If something in this stirred you, if something here felt familiar in a way you can't quite explain, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment and tell me what shifted. What did you recognize? What clicked? Not as an achievement to report, but as a way of acknowledging to yourself that something happened here, something beyond words, something that you've always known but might have needed permission to remember. And if you know someone who's tired of the search, someone who's exhausted from trying to figure it out, someone who might be ready to stop and see that what they've been looking for has never been somewhere else, share this with them, not as another thing to consume, but as an invitation to rest. As a reminder that the journey was always the destination and that the destination was always here. In the next exploration, we'll go deeper into something that builds on this. We'll look at why time itself might be the final illusion, why the past and future that feel so solid might be elaborate stories, and what happens when you start to live as if now is all there is, because it is, and that isn't a burden, it's the doorway to freedom. Until then, remember, the sky was never hidden, the clearing was never far, and you were never, not for a single moment, lost.